both are fresh from the movie theaters because you went on your own dime to go see. I need to make sure I pull up to get the full. Oh, did they retitle this movie? Dang. I guess it's just called Ballerina now, instead of what it was titled when I went to the press screening, which was From the World of John Wick, Ballerina. And I feel like it could have had another colon at the end and been like a John Wick story or something like that.
Yeah, I think just...
Well, except it's not really a John Wick story because he's only barely in the movie.
I was going to say.
That is true.
They throw him on the poster. That should be enough to give you a clue of what you're in for. So.
Oh, wait, I got a question for you guys. Wait, I got a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that Keanu Reeves got paid more than Ana de Armas did?
I'm gonna say,
I have to imagine so.
Yeah, because he's a producer too. So yeah.
Yeah, and he's a bigger star and was doing more of a favor, I have to imagine, by like coming into, spoiler alert, 2 scenes in this movie basically.
Yeah.
I mean, he's in the finale.
Yeah.
He's there.
Yeah.
That screams.
He's somewhere.
That screams reshoots to me. Like that screams.
I'm glad you brought that up, Josh. Because that is exactly what happened. So I don't know if you guys have tracked the production of this movie, which is the John Wick spinoff that we are getting this summer, as Lionsgate attempts to build out a new cinematic universe of assassins based off the popular John Wick franchise. And this movie was directed by Lynn Weissman, who is known for doing kind of like working on the underworld movies.
Made the second Die Hard movie, so I know he's really excited that 5th one came out.
Yeah. Never saw the 5th Die Hard movie, but I will 1000% agree with you. I do not like. Is it Live Free or Die Hard? Is that what that one's called?
That's the Lynn Weissman one, yeah.
Okay.
Bad.
So Lynn Weissman comes in to direct this spin-off starring Ana de Armas as a ballerina who wants to be an assassin, so she's trained to be an assassin, but also trained to be a ballerina, and she has her own revenge mission, and it all kind of doesn't make sense, and it's sort of inconsequential.
I was going to say, Jesse, don't bother to try and explain the plot.
I just wanted to make sure the listeners knew that this was not the newest version of Swan Lake that they were getting to see on the
I think for
screen.
The people who do care about the lore and continuity of these things, they make it pretty clear that they're spitting you in to this is happening the same time as John Wick 3, because you've got the Angelica Houston character, Ana de Armas is part of her group or clan or whatever they want to call it, and then you have occasional appearances from Ian McShane and the late, great Lance Reddick, to kind of give their wink and seal of approval that, no, this is legit. This isn't like that Peacock show,
Oh, I forgot that happened. Wow.
Yeah.
Wasn't Mel Gibson in that?
Yeah.
Yes. I think they're trying really hard to make everybody forget that happened.
So, Josh, as you hinted, reshoots, which is exactly what happened with this movie of Lynn Weissman directed his cut, then apparently no one was satisfied, and then Chad Stulski, who's kind of been the sort of overseer of the John Wick movies, was brought in to, it was originally announced kind of do some kind of punch up on the action scenes, and then I think it's kind of come out like basically reshot a lot of the movie. And I kind of preface that to say, well, first, what did you guys think of this movie? You guys have seen this more recently than I have, but I imagine based off of some brief pitter-patter I had with Josh before Jason joined us, we're possibly all on the same page about this movie.
Yeah, it was...
I would say it's a perfectly fine
exactly what
action
I was
movie.
say. Yeah.
It is not nearly at the quality of the previous John Wick films, which I think are all really, really excellent. The story doesn't make sense. Now, not that John Wick is always like, oh, the story is fabulous. But in this one, the story doesn't make sense, like, in a way that none of the John Wick movies...
This one really feels like it's kind of flying by the seat of its pants. You know what I mean? Like really feels like can someone just jump out of a bush and attack Ana de Armas? Like we understand that none of this really makes sense.
Yeah.
She goes up against an entire village of people, and we, by the way, never really understand exactly why that village is what it is, but everyone in the village is an assassin. Everyone, literally every single person, on, I guess, even on down to the little kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a really weird idea, which I think you spend so much time sort of wondering, like, what is going on here, that you don't appreciate the action scenes, which are pretty good, but they feel, a lot of them to me felt like, stuff that they sort of consider for John Wick, and then they go, no, that's not good enough. With the exception of there's one sequence, I'll just say it, involving flamethrowers.
Yes.
100%.
That was awesome. That was great. But other than that, like, the rest of this feels like, grade B John Wick.
Yeah, it was the two parts that stood out to me. Obviously, it's the flamethrower bit. And then when she gets to the town and stops in this, like, bar/coffee shop, I thought that was a fun, like, 5 minutes or so. But yeah, I don't think it's an accident.
You're talking about the broken plates.
Yes, yeah.
The broken plates are awesome.
And I don't think it's an accident, like we were saying, that the action is the best part, and that's the part that Chad Stulski came in to do. And so the fact that in a two-hour and change movie, there's maybe 25 minutes where there's not fighting leads me to believe, Stulski came in and redid the whole thing.
Yeah, I'm sort of just like, I think this movie's kind of aggressively mid in the way that, like, I think as we're all kind of saying, like, it feels like they kind of had sort of a problem movie on their hand and was like, can we bring in Chad Stulski to at least just, like, get the action scenes up to more of a John Wick level? And to all credit where credit is due, they at least, like, largely get there. And Ana de Armas, I think, even though she doesn't quite have, there's something about that you kind of notice, like, even when Keanu Reeves, like, enters this movie, that's sort of the magic of the John Wick movies is Keanu Reeves just as a man who's, like, so tired and doesn't want to be in an action movie. And whereas, like, this one is like Ana de Armas, like, please put me in an action movie. And I think, I've loved her in other stuff. She was my favorite part of the most recent Daniel Craig Bond movie. I thought that whole, like, excursion with her in Mexico was, like, the most fun part of that movie. But this really does feel like a movie that kind of, like, had all these kind of narrative problems and feels a little narratively messy. And at a certain point, kind of the reshoots just sort of became like, all right, well, if we can just keep this movie, like, moving at a breakneck pace and constantly be throwing action scenes at you, and the action scenes actually be, like, fairly watchable and up to at least, like, the base level of the John Wick standard, then, like, maybe you at least have a, like, watchable, like, 3 out of 5 star action movie, which is, I would say, what you get here. And other than the one kind of flamethrower sequence towards the end, I wouldn't say any of the set pieces here really, like, rise to the level of some of the best stuff in the John Wick franchise.
No, not close. One thing I'll say is I actually thought Ana de Armas was better in the Bond movie than she is in this movie.
Is more fun and kind of, has a buoyancy to her where she's
not
so,
as
like,
grim.
brooding in this one.
Yeah.
Well, and the fights, like, the fighting she did in Bond, and there wasn't a lot of it, not nearly even close to the scale we get in this film, but it was a little more acrobatic.
Mm-hmm.
And in this movie, it's very brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, it's really, lots of just hand-to-hand beating each other kind of combat. There's not a ton of guns. I mean, they're present, but there's not a lot of shooting people, I thought, compared to other John Wick movies. So it's more hand-to-hand. And I don't know, I had a little trouble with Ana de Armas.
Don't forget
doing
grenades.
some of this stuff.
Oh, that's true.
That's true. There are a lot of grenades.
But
yeah,
so
a lot of scenes like this. I would say you would be satisfied if you're just sort of going into this of, like, can I see a movie where Ana de Armas just, like, stabs people in the face for 2 hours, and, like, your mileage will vary about, like, how much pleasure you're going to get from that. But Josh, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think not that the original John Wick was some, like, breath of fresh air of creative integrity. Like it's still just a revenge movie with some really cool fights, but it still feels like that came from a screenwriter going, I want to do my take on a revenge movie, whereas this feels like it was born in a boardroom. Like there's
Yeah.
no reason for this film to exist
Great point.
other than Keanu's getting old and doesn't want to do a lot more of these. We got to keep the money coming in, and I don't think it's an accident that a lot of my issues with the movie stem from a lot of the issues that I had with John Wick 3, which I think is the least good of the Wick films, setting it in that time
Agreed.
where I was
Agreed.
starting to get real tired of the lore. And this
Yeah.
movie is nothing but, it's almost like the footnotes in a Lord of the Rings book. It's like, hey, here's all this other stuff that he wrote for the nerds that are really interested in diving deep. The lore has always been my least favorite part of the John Wick films, the mythology and stuff. So,
Well, and the frustrating thing here, I don't know that we need to say that much more about
Yeah.
it. I mean, we've told folks what they need to know, which is you're getting a B- John Wick movie.
Yep.
But the frustrating thing about the lore, Josh, is that like they set up a bunch of lore and then they sort of don't pay any of it off.
or they set it up for
I-
a sequel
it-
that
it-
we might get later, you know.
I don't think so, because the mystery lore, the stuff that they're setting up, I feel like was all destroyed.
Do you guys feel like the lore is kind of, maybe this is a way to like kind of transition to, you guys watch this new documentary called Wick is Pain that's basically kind of a behind the scenes doc about the John Wick franchise. I mean, tell me if you guys disagree, but like I don't feel like the lore and sort of the world building within John Wick, it's more of a kind of a fun accoutrement, but it's not like, it's, I don't think like the centerpiece about like what made that action series so effective and so
Absolutely.
consistently good. But that seems to be the takeaway that kind of Lionsgate and the studio bigwigs have kind of taken from that, is like, oh, we have this like fun world of like international assassins and they have all these rules and stuff, and look at the infinite story possibilities that this world provides. And maybe I kind of walked out of Ballerina feeling like I don't know that like I don't know that there's really that many stories to tell in this world, actually.
Yeah, I feel like the first movie had just enough where it hints at this crazy world that we don't know about, and it's really cool. And then the more chapters we got, it kind of reminded me of the old Patton Oswalt bit about the Star Wars prequels, where he's like, I don't care where the stuff I love comes from. I just love the stuff I love. I don't need to know about
That's great.
John Wick
Yes.
midichlorians or anything like that. Just let me know that he's a Jedi in this cool world, and I'm fine leaving it at there. I don't need to know the currency exchange for the coins. I don't need to know what each individual tattoo means. You know, like, just hint at the world and show us cool fights.
You don't need to know the location of every single continental hotel in the entire world.
No, but it feels like I do now, and I
Which
don't
the
need
more
that.
they get, the more they show you, the more you kind of, your suspension of disbelief starts to kind of fall apart, where like the one, what is it, like the Continental in Denmark or something that she goes to in this movie, and Prague,
yeah.
and it's like, it's very much like, looks like it's kind of out in the open and kind of like any person just like walking down the boardwalk.
It's a
There's
cool
no
looking
more
hotel.
secrecy, you know. And to kind of wrap it up with what you guys were saying, if we now live in a world where you have an entire mid-sized village full of John Wick level assassins, where are the regular people now? Are we just living on a planet where everybody except like 10 people is a hardcore assassin, you know? Like it makes the
Wait, hold on. I want to transition us, because we were supposed to be talking about Wick
Yes.
is Pain, the documentary about making these movies. And I actually think years ago I used to watch DVD making of stuff all the time. It was like a staple on DVDs. And I work at CNN. I used to actually review the content that was on DVDs. It's something I did for CNN. So I know making of documentaries. This is a really good making of documentary. And it's really good not because it gets into the lore. It's because it gets into what makes the John Wick franchise so great, which is all these people who are brilliant stuntmen and stunt women, folks who have like designed and invented ways of doing stunts, doing gags with guns and other stuff like that. Gag, by the way, means a stunt. It doesn't mean like a joke. And we get to really understand how these people came up with the ideas that are revolutionary and groundbreaking and have made the John Wick movies look like nothing else in terms of the fight scenes and the stunts and the action. And then in addition to that, we get a really great story about how the first movie really almost didn't happen. I mean, when you think about how much money, how many careers have come out of John Wick, not just Keanu Reeves, but like a lot of people behind the scenes who are now huge directors, huge players in Hollywood. And it really almost didn't happen.
Yeah.
It was
And
almost a like direct to
documentary, I think,
DVD
is-
movie, right? Like the first one.
That was going to be their best case scenario. It almost just didn't happen, and the producers were going to get sued into oblivion. They revealed that when they were getting ready to shoot on a Monday, and the funding fell through over the weekend. So in the span of about 5 days, they were able to push shooting from Monday to Friday, and in that scramble, they found a couple of like angel investors, right, that like came and saved their butts. And one of the cool reveals, it's not really a reveal, their name is in the credits of the first movie, is like a producer who you wouldn't expect, you know, came in with their own money and now is reaping insane rewards for this risk that she took in a week in 2011 or whatever, you know.
Wait, who is this person?
Eva Longoria.
Well, oh, interesting.
Yeah, she used that Desperate
I did not know
Housewives
that.
money, man. Yeah, and so like in the first John Wick, you get produced by
That's how
Eva
she's able to
Longoria.
do that Spain TV show for.
Yeah,
for
she's got John
CNN.
Wick money,
She
man.
just traveled.
She got in on the ground floor.
Well, you know, the other thing that you forget is that Keanu Reeves was like, his career had been way up here. It was way down here when he made John Wick.
Yeah, while that, you know, the
And I mean, now he's a huge star.
and while, you know, the documentary talks about while they were getting John Wick up and running, 2 of his movies in a row tanked. So now nobody wants to make a Keanu
Bombed.
Reeves movie, you know, and so it was just like strike 1, strike 2, strike 11, strike 12. Like it was just, the world was against this movie getting made. And they're filming at the time this is happening. So that was one of the big surprises for me, is like, because this is a documentary from Lionsgate, it's produced by Keanu Reeves, it's produced by Chad Stulski, I was expecting like a 2-hour-long puff piece, you know, just like patting ourselves on the back and
It's
look
not.
how awesome we are. The first hour of this is devoted to just the original John Wick, and it's stuff that you would not see in a normal documentary about a movie these days.
Oh, perfect.
And the last thing I'll add about it, and then we can kind of wrap all this up. You know, in addition to Josh and I saying it's a real, if you love movies, you should go see Wick is Pain. You would think with Keanu Reeves' involvement in the franchise, with his involvement in making this film, that the movie would be this making of documentary would have a lot of Keanu Reeves. It is really more Chad Stulski and David Leach, who is his co-director on that first film. And David Leach has since gone on to make a lot of other really interesting movies. Chad Stulski sort of guides the John Wick franchise around. But those 2 guys, to me, are the main characters in this.
Yeah.
And that's just unusual. You've got a big, big star. That's who everyone's sort of mostly interested in. But the movie succeeds because it focuses on these guys who are the real inventive ones, who are the guys who really changed things in Hollywood in terms of how action movies could be made.
Yeah, and it doesn't shy away from their creative conflicts. You know, I think there's a reason they haven't worked together on one of these since the first one. I think that's a really obvious reason 2, 3, and 4 are so much different in tone than that original film, is because they just saw these universes in different ways. And they don't shy away from that. And, you know, the movie opens, it's not really, you can't really spoil a documentary, I guess, but the movie opens with Chad Stulski kind of having to come to terms with the fact that the reason he has a career is because he was Brandon Lee's buddy and helped The Crow get finished after that tragedy with Brandon Lee on set. And he's like, if
he doubled for Brandon Lee
on the last 2
when Brandon
weeks
Lee
of the
dies
shoot,
and they need to finish making The Crow. Yeah, Chad Stulski is the guy who doubles for Brandon Lee. And again, this movie deals with that. straight up. And Chad Stulski basically says to you, if my good friend hadn't died, I wouldn't have the career I have today. Which is that you don't get that kind of stuff in the making of documentaries.
It's just like really raw honesty, and it's really fascinating to watch. And as we get into the second hour and it focuses more on the sequels, it does get a little like, look how awesome we are. But I think it's worth seeing just for that first hour, where it's really raw and really unafraid to show you the levels of stress and frustration that resulted in trying to get this movie made.
Yeah, really is one of the more kind of like fascinating, like word of mouth, like Hollywood success stories of like, I remember that first movie coming out and being like, oh, what is this, some like revenge movie with Keanu Reeves, and then like not seeing, I don't know about you guys, like I didn't see it until it was streaming like on Netflix or something, and it just became this thing of like, you would be hanging out with someone and
dude, I saw it in theaters.
Yeah, same. I saw it in the theater.
It was awesome. I saw it in theaters.
You saw it in theaters?
Well,
so you were there day one. I was the person that was like, someone at like a party or something would be like, oh, did you see that action movie where Keanu Reeves gets revenge for the guys that kill his dog? It's actually really good. And then like lo and behold, now it's become like one of the biggest action franchises currently. Yeah,
the doc kind of goes into that like a big help in the movie's success was that screening they did at South by Southwest. That the reception they got there is what saved it from going direct to video.